Hey, thank you for joining this video on biology. This will be about the last section in chapter 11. It'll be section 4. And if you're here live, you can participate in all of the questions that you'll see on your screen. If you're watching this recording later, there's nothing for you to do or submit. You just follow along. So chapter 11 is Introduction to Genetics, and this is the last section of it, section 4. So all of the genetic information for an organism is coded in the structure of a giant DNA molecule. Then the DNA is packaged into threads called chromosomes for easy handling. When the cell divides, it needs to package them up so that it can move them around easily. And humans have a total of 23 sets of chromosomes, and that's what's pictured here. And they make up the entire DNA of an individual human. In an organism's body, most cells have 2 complete copies of DNA, making 2 complete sets of chromosomes. One set was inherited from the organism's mom and one set from its dad. Chromosomes that have the same sets of genes on them but came from different parents are called homologous. For example, this pair of homologous chromosomes that I've circled may have genes that code for eye color. And so they are homologous. They code for a certain thing. Both of them code for the same thing. Even if one codes for brown eyes and one codes for green eyes, those are the genes where, or the chromosomes where the eye color genes are found. So the 2 of them are homologous. This pair of chromosomes may have a gene that controls blood type, so they are homologous, even if the organism inherited type A from dad and type B from mom. Most cells in the body have these 2 complete sets of chromosomes, and they are called diploid cells or 2N cells. However, in order to reproduce sexually and have the offspring have the right number of chromosomes, the homologous chromosomes have to split apart or segregate when the eggs and sperm are formed. The sperm and egg cells have only one set of chromosomes, and they're called haploid cells or 1N cells. Each sperm or egg gets one complete set of chromosomes. So they won't be missing any, but they also won't have an extra copy, just one complete set. So before we go any further, I want to really drill these terms into your head. Haploid means one set of chromosomes. It's called 1N, and only egg and sperm cells in animals are haploids. Now, in many plants, there's a phase with a whole haploid body, but if you think in terms of animals, it's just the egg and sperm. Diploid means 2 sets of chromosomes. Diploid cells are called 2N, and they are all of the other cells in an animal's body. Everything that isn't egg and sperm is a diploid cell. So before we move on, we've got a quick review about what these terms mean. So which of the following is true about haploid cells? So if you're here live, you'll be seeing the poll come up on your screen for you to answer now. So again, nobody can see your answer, just the group's answers as a whole. And it's not graded. So if you don't know for sure what the right answer is, that's okay. I just want everybody to vote so that we can see if I'm doing a good job of teaching it, if you guys are following along. Okay, so I'm going to stop talking for a few seconds. Everybody vote for the correct answer. Okay, everybody voted at the last second there. Great. Okay, so it looks like Ooh, okay, it looks like our vote was split, and neither of them were the right answers. So let's go over all of our options. So they have two copies of each chromosome. No. Haploid cells have one copy. So that's what we just went over on the last slide. A haploid means one copy, diploid is two copies. Next, most cells in the body are haploid. Well, that's also not true. So in a human body or an animal body, almost all of the cells are diploid. The only ones that are haploid are the egg cells and the sperm cells. That's it. Because remember, the idea is the eggs only have one copy of DNA and the sperm only have one copy of DNA. So when they come together, then the resulting offspring is going to have two copies. And nobody said this one, they're labeled 3N. That's because it's not, it's 2N. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, it's 1N. Haploid are 1N, diploid are 2N. There aren't any 3N. And so I apologize, we didn't actually go over this yet. The correct answer is this last one. They're produced in meiosis 2, which we are about to talk about now. So sorry this question kind of came a little early, but those first three are definitely not true. So you need to review the difference between haploid and diploid. Okay, so the process of making haploid cells is called meiosis. Meiosis starts with a normal cell in interphase. That's the phase of the cell where the cell is just doing normal cell stuff. And the DNA replicates, so the cell temporarily has four copies of DNA. So each of those X's is two copies, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now in meiosis 1, the homologous chromosomes line up and then separate when the cell divides. And then there are now two daughter cells, each of which have two sets of DNA. Okay, so we had four originally, and now each daughter cell has two. Then, in meiosis 2, each of those divides again, creating four daughter cells, each of which only has one DNA. Okay, so you start with one cell, it divides, it divides again, and you end up with four cells. And each of those four cells only has one copy of DNA. So if it's making sperm cells, it makes four sperm cells just from doing this process once. And each of those cells only has one copy of DNA. Now that was just an overview, but there's a lot of steps and you do actually need to know them. Meiosis 1 and Meiosis 2 have a total of 9 phases. Be sure to use your textbook to review each step. You may need to know which step happens in which phases for an exam. So they are all described on pages 276 and 277. And we're going to go over all 9 of these phases right now. So we start with interphase. So remember, this is when the cell is just doing cell stuff. It's growing, it's going through the actions of normal cells. But the one thing that it does do that's important to this is the DNA replicates. So it now has an extra copy of all the DNA. So after interphase is where the really interesting stuff starts happening. The next phase is called prophase 1. So all of these phases are going to be 1 or 2. We go through a whole set of 1 phases. That's basically the first cell division. And then it kind of restarts and you have a second cell division and that's going to be the number 2 phases. So prophase 1, the chromosomes condense and pair up. Crossing over occurs, so that's where some of the genes from one chromosome kind of swap with genes from the homologous chromosome. Then we have metaphase 1, where the pairs of homologous chromosomes line up around the middle and fibers attached to them. So these are spindle fibers that are going to end up pulling them apart. So that's in metaphase where they're lining up. Then we have anaphase 1, where they start to move. They get pulled away from the middle into opposite sides of the cell so that the cell will be able to divide and make sure that there's a complete set of DNA on each side. And then telophase and cytokinesis is where you've got the chromosomes pulled onto separate sides, and the cytoplasm starts dividing in between it. So you can see that one cell is starting to divide into two, and new membranes are forming around each nucleus. So our chromosomes were kind of just floating out in the cytoplasm attached to the spindles. Now they're being sent into a nucleus. Okay, so that's the first 5 phases. You've got interphase, prophase 1, metaphase 1, anaphase 1, telophase 1, and now we go into the second set. So prophase 2, similar kind of stuff is going to happen in this whole set. You've got chromosomes that need to divide again, so all the structures start reforming. Metaphase 2, they line up again. Anaphase 2, they divide. And notice that in this whole series, the prophase 2, metaphase 2, anaphase 2, we have 2 cells doing the exact same thing at once. So you have 2 daughter cells from that first cell division, and they're just dividing again right away. So you have on the top and bottom here 2 cells doing the exact same thing. So you have metaphase, they're both lined up, anaphase, they're both dividing. And again, telekinesis, gosh, telophase and cytokinesis, where they are dividing to create new cells. So when the 2 on the top divide and the 2 on the bottom divide, you end up with a total of 4. So I know that's a lot, but again, it's in your book on page 276 and 277. So make sure you bookmark those. You'll need to know those phases for the test and what happens in each phase. Now to end, remember that sexual reproduction involves an egg cell being fertilized by a sperm cell, and each of these cells is haploid. They only have one copy of DNA. But fertilization joins them together into a zygote, which has both copies of DNA and is diploid. The zygote begins normal cell division, and the body of the new offspring begins growing with diploid cells. So this is how we have an egg and a sperm cell, let me go back, that only had one copy of DNA, but the rest of your body, once that fertilization happens, the embryo starts growing, the rest of the body has normal diploid cells because they've come together, formed a diploid, and now we're dividing, so there's just constantly diploid. And one more thing, in the beginning of chapter 11, we discussed independent assortment, where unrelated genes are mixed up before being passed down to offspring, so that if a parent has multiple offspring, it gives each offspring a different combination of genes. However, you've now learned that DNA is packaged into chromosomes for reproduction, not individual genes. So this means that actually the entire chromosomes are shuffled around. Genes that are on the same chromosome, they don't get separated from each other. They get passed down together, even if they are for unrelated traits. So we call these linked genes. Okay, so you should know those terms, independent assortment and linked genes. Now, one last review question. Which is true about meiosis? So I'm going to put this poll up on the screen now that we've actually talked about meiosis. There we go. So which is true? Is used in asexual reproduction, that means not sexual. It produces 4 haploid daughter cells. It produces 2 diploid daughter cells. It keeps the number of chromosomes the same. Only one of those is true. So I'm going to stop talking for a few seconds and wait for you to answer. Okay, well, I'm sad to see that not everyone voted, but those of you that did a good job. So, which is true about meiosis? Well, first of all, it's used in asexual reproduction. That is not true. That's mitosis. So, mitosis is a cell dividing and producing a similar cell. So, it's what happens in asexual reproduction, where like single-celled organisms just kind of make a new cell. And also like growth of body parts. Okay, so as you grow and get bigger, you need more cells in your body, so that's what's happening. Meiosis is only for making those egg and sperm cells, so it's only for sexual reproduction. Next one, it produces 4 haploid daughter cells. That is the correct answer, so if you got that, good job. Next one is not true. 2 diploid daughter cells, that's also meiosis. And the next one is also not true. It does not keep the number of chromosomes the same. You end up with the daughter cells only having half as many chromosomes. Okay, they become haploid. So that brings us to the end of this section. But if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact an instructor.